Hey everyone, welcome to the Digging Deeper podcast, episode 3.
We did it.
Yay, we made it. In this podcast, we really just dig into this week's sermon and just figure out a way to dig it a little bit deeper into our hearts. And so we're so glad that y'all joined us today. My name is Chris Brown. I'm the associate pastor here.
My name is Jacob Belding. I'm the connections minister here.
And we've got Judah Sanderford on sound.
Hey.
All right, well, we are glad that y'all joined us today. Before I forget, I always mean to say this every time. If you're not subscribed or if you haven't liked the video, go like it, go subscribe, go follow our pages and all that. It just helps the algorithm and all that. And then you get to just stay up to date on, what's going on here at the church and, what we're doing on this podcast. We enjoy doing this every week and we want you to be able to see it. So, just take a moment, like and subscribe down there, and then just, feel free to comment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Yeah, if you got anything you want to add, we'd love to see it. But without further ado, we're going to get into the sermon, which this Sunday was Father's Day.
Yes.
Did you do anything for Father's Day?
I ate some steak.
You ate some steak?
Yes, I did.
Homemade or?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My father-in-law is excellent at grilling steak. Mm-hmm. Actually, had no idea that steak was good growing up because usually when it came off the grill, it was extremely well done. And I'm like, what's this big deal about steak? It's chewy. It's hard to eat. I'm still chewing on it an hour later.
Yeah, did you ever do the thing where you're chewing on it and you literally can't swallow it?
Yeah.
Like you're trying to swallow it and you just can't.
Yeah. So I had no idea steak was good. And so I started, me and my wife started dating and her dad made steaks one time. And I'm thinking, oh, great. We're going to have to, how am I supposed to talk and chew at the same time? And,
where's the ketchup?
Yeah, exactly. Pass the ketchup, please. There's no ketchup on the table. And it was like solid medium rare on the rarer side. Oh, it's delicious.
Yeah. So, if there's not juices coming out of it, just send it back.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? What did you guys do for Father's Day?
So on actual Father's Day, we went to my grandparents and visited with my family, had some ribs. That was fun.
Oh.
Enjoyed that. Now, as a family, like immediate family, we celebrate Father's Day the day before. And for Father's Day, Randy let me choose where we get to eat, which is a rare treat.
Yes. What a blessing.
What a blessing. So we actually went to Panda Express. I can hardly ever get Randy to go to Panda Express for some reason. And she's like, where do you want to go? You choose. And I'm like, Panda
Express.
So, there we go. Went and drove, and it was great, and she actually liked it. And
man.
Maybe I can get her to go there more often. But Judah, you do anything fun for Father's Day?
Yes, I did. I went swimming at my grandparents' house.
I'm guessing your dad was there.
Yeah.
Okay, phew. As long as your dad is there as part of the Father's Day celebration.
Just ditched your dad to go swimming. Whatever.
Yes, well, this Sunday was Father's Day, and so we hope you had a great Father's Day. And oddly enough, coincidentally enough, the sermon was about fathers.
Yes, it was.
Which makes sense. So the sermon's title was The Faith of a Father, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But I've got an image to show you.
Oh, no.
You probably saw it, but let's go and throw it up there. So here's the title slide for the sermon. Did you see this?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. So Pastor Lee explained this was, I think, his first childhood home. Is that right? No.
I think that's what he said.
Yeah, his first one, and that's his dad sitting right there. And I'm more interested in this gargantuan picnic table made of concrete.
I even liked Lee's joke, Pastor Lee's joke. He said, that would be the one thing that would survive the apocalypse or the second coming.
Man, absolutely.
Until the second coming.
Man, goodness gracious. Like that, they don't make picnic tables like that anymore.
No, they don't.
Yeah. Like that thing is going to be here. Like if there was a tornado, if there was an earthquake, I would get underneath that picnic table.
You would have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, and he says Dad made that, right?
I don't recall what
I think that's what he said. But geez, that is a gargantuan picnic table. Anyways,
we should bring those back.
We should just go home today and just start building a concrete table.
A new project on which we can eat our Father's Day steaks and ribs.
Yes.
And, out by the swimming pool, even.
Yeah. So anyways, the Sunday sermon was entitled "The Faith of a Father," and it was all about Manasseh. Is that how you say it? The King Manasseh for the Israelites, and we're going to talk about it. But Manasseh was a pretty awful guy.
Yep.
But then repented later on. And so in the same way that he led the Israelites away from God, he also started to bring the Israelites back to God.
Yes.
Towards the end of his reign. There's a lot of interesting things we're going to talk about Manasseh, but first we're going to go through the points that Pastor Lee gave, because what he was trying to do with this is looking at the story of Manasseh and some other things surrounding it, and figuring out, okay, what can we as fathers learn from this situation going on?
Right.
And so it's a little bit shorter in the sense of there's only 2 points that we're going to talk about. But those 2 points are, 1, stay faithful. So what can we as fathers do? We can stay faithful. And 2, we can stay home. Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to dig into that. But before we dig into that, our passage for this is 2 Chronicles 33, 1 through 10. Do you got that pulled up?
Yes, I do.
All right, so let's go ahead and read that.
All right, 2 Chronicles 33, verses 1 through 10. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had broken down, and he erected altars to the Baals, and made Asherah, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. And he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, In Jerusalem shall my name be forever. And he built altars for all the host of heaven in the 2 courts of the house of the Lord. And he burned his sons as an offering in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and used fortune-telling and omens and sorcery, and dealt with mediums and with necromancers.
So there's already enough stuff. Let's just stop there for a second.
There?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's just pause right there, and let's just go through some of the highlights of this guy's career. So what do we got so far? So one, he was 12 years old.
He was 12, and he reigned a long time.
55 years.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
How long did Queen Elizabeth II reign in England? How long was she queen?
I don't know. Judah, look that for us.
She was queen for a long time, too. Just, it's not always very common that rulers reign that long.
Yeah. That is a long time.
Mm-hmm. Even Queen Elizabeth I reigned a very, very long time, which is kind of, it's interesting. Sometimes it's a very, very good thing, right? Other times, not so much.
Yeah, not so much. Yeah, so while we're waiting on Judah to look that up. So he was 12 years old, reigned 55 years, and he did what was evil in the Lord's sight, which is probably an understatement.
Yeah. Big time.
So what's some of the highlights that he did?
Well, some of the things that he did a lot of the same evil things in verse 2, that the nations that were living in the land of Canaan at the time of the Israelite conquest, all the same things that they were doing is what he brings back. So in a way, it's like, what are you doing? This is the opposite of the point of you guys being here.
We're undoing everything that we did, and he actually kind of mentions that. So each time, do you got it?
Yeah. So she reigned from 1952 to 2002, 22.
That's 50 years.
70.
Oh, 70 years. Oh
70
wow.
years.
70 years. Jeez.
Long time.
Yeah. So one thing I find interesting is with every sacrament, if you will, that the temple has and that he's undoing, it gives like the basis for why that's even there, right? And so it's like in like he built altars in the Lord's temple where the Lord had said, "Jerusalem is where my name will remain forever." So it's saying, this is what the purpose of this temple is for, and like this is like why this temple was built, and then it's saying, this is what he's doing to it.
Exactly.
So undoing a lot of the work that Israel had done up to that point,
right,
to get to where it is. What's some other things that he did?
So not only did he build altars to the Baals and build Asherah poles, but it says in verse 5. he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. So that would be, so that's pretty pervasive, is what that means in the temple. It's not just like, oh, these were just sort of radiating outside, and then the worship of the one and true God is sort of kept separate. It's like these things are being intermingled together. Yeah, which again is a really big deal. It's not a good look.
Yeah, so it says
Manasseh.
he practiced witchcraft, divination, sorcery, mediums, spiritist, just not good things. Not good things for anyone to do, much less a king to do, because everything's going to trickle down from the top there on that.
Even the fortune telling and omens, sorcery, he dealt with mediums, and my translation says necromancers. I mean, a lot of the things that he's sort of consulting in order to maybe decide on what to do in a particular situation or to learn things about the future. I mean, he's completely disregarded and departed from God's law. That's part of the point is God made it very clear in the Old Testament and laid out the law. Here's how we go about living our lives as king. Here are the things that you need to uphold. God's very clear about those things. And the only reason I can think of why anybody would go and look for omens or do any kind of fortune telling anything or dealing with mediums is it's just a complete departure from the law of God.
Which is where we're going to get into the first point.
Yep.
Stay faithful.
Right.
That's what he didn't do. He didn't stay faithful as the king. And so what that ended up causing him to do is not only lead himself astray, but lead all of Israel astray as well.
Yep.
And so I think, we can come back to the passage in just a second, but we can go ahead and get into that point of stay faithful. One of the things that Lee pointed out is that fathers, we have a tremendous power to lead our family and to lead our kids, and for better or worse. So we can either lead them to God or it can lead them away from God. You got any thoughts on that?
And it really starts with husbands. It starts with fathers. It starts with men even. And so particularly within the Christian home, right, men are called to be spiritual leaders in the home. And so if we as men aren't staying faithful, then the immediate sort of result of that is going to be our wives, our children also will suffer because of those choices that we make if we're not being faithful. And so there's a lot of responsibility there, which even gets into point two a little bit. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Yeah. If we want there to be any sort of revival to take place, if we want our kids to remain faithful, we need to set a good example ourselves, remaining faithful.
He mentioned statistics of families that the dad follows Christ. There's a much higher percentage of the wife and the kids also following Christ as well, where if the dad isn't following Christ, it's much less percentage of them following Christ as well. And so it's just very much of we do have a great influence, no matter how much the world is trying to tell us that men don't have an influence in their families, that moms can do it all by themselves. And that's no dig on single mothers. My mom was a single mother. It's no dig against them. It's just you need a male influence there. You need a father figure there, and there's something that fathers can do that men or mothers can't do. And to be fair, there's things that mothers can do that fathers can't do either.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of our roles is to lead, and in leading, staying faithful to Christ and leading our family in that.
So let me ask you a question. So, when we say stay faithful, I think that's an excellent point. It's something that we all need to be striving to do, is remain faithful through all different seasons in our lives. So what does that look like? How can we go about being faithful in practice? Are there any practical steps or anything in particular to focus on when it comes to remaining faithful in regard especially to our families?
Yeah, so I think particularly from like a father standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things is just like showing your faith. I think that's like in the same way that like I have to be faithful just in my own personal life before I can be faithful to my family, right? And so it's very much like if I tell Lottie, do these things, but I'm not doing these things, then I'm not being faithful, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm like, rules for thee, but not for me, mm-hmm. kind of thing. And I think, with kids, as I'm sure you've realized, a lot more is caught than taught.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Lottie will repeat what we say, right? And so if she's not seeing me live out my life and following God, then she a lot of time isn't going to do it either, mm-hmm. right? If prayer isn't an important thing to me, it's probably not going to be an important thing to her. Mm-hmm. If going to church and building community and studying the Bible isn't important to me, it's probably not going to be important to her. It may be important to her like in her younger years, when it's fun,
right.
To go to kids' church and stuff. But when she grows up and, the games go away, if she hasn't, had it embedded in her of why we go to church and why we're part of this community, then she's just not going to see it as important, and she's just going to drift, mm-hmm. right? And so I think that's one of the big things is just in our own personal life, just live it out, mm-hmm. live it out, and let them see that. So we host our small group in our home from time to time, and so we'll have 8 or 10 people in our living room, and we have 2 kids, and there's a few other babies and another 2 or 3 year old in there, and they all take turns on crying. And so sometimes my daughter is just not having a good time, and she's crying, and it can very easily like start to like distract a mm-hmm. little bit. And I told the group one time, I was like, hey, I realize that my daughter's being a little bit of a distraction right now. But I thank y'all for y'all's patience, because what I love about having her here is that she's seeing us look at the Bible and talk through all these things. And so she's seeing that church isn't just a Sunday morning thing, but it's this is a real thing that's coming into our lives. And my hope is that she'll have those memories going forward of, if she doesn't remember anything else about church, she'll remember the community of people that gather together in our home, where we're seriously going to talk about what's going on in each other's lives and pray for each other and dig into the Word. And I think that's going to, again, she's going to see that as me and Randy being faithful in our faith, and then that'll translate to her being faithful in her faith mm-hmm. as well.
Yep, more caught than taught for sure.
Yeah,
which is it kind of brings up another point too, that kids, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, but kids almost act like a mirror reflection of us.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've noticed this with yours.
I
but,
have.
Oh, man. It's, one of my kids will do something or say something or use a tone that, like, I don't appreciate you using that tone or whatever. And then I've got to think about it. I'm like, okay, that's a little convicting. Maybe I've used that tone, mm-hmm. Or maybe I've done that thing or said that thing that I don't appreciate them doing or saying. And so, mm-hmm. It definitely. I mean, there's a lot of, again, responsibility there, and but the mirror is nice because it even helps us to make those own adjustments. Mm-hmm. For me, I know that even blind spots that, mm-hmm. man, I didn't realize I was talking that way.
Yeah, you don't realize what you actually say.
Yeah.
Lottie...
Till they tape record it back for
you. Pretty much. Like, something will happen. Lottie will go, oh my goodness. And I'm like, where'd you hear that? And then 5 minutes later, something happened, and I went, oh my goodness. I'm like, oh, it's me. That's where she heard it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So when I was in college, this doesn't have to do with kids, but similar, mirror reflection aspect. I was hanging out with a group of friends, and they point out to me that I say "we was" a lot. Like we was going over here, mm-hmm. and I looked at them and I was like, I don't say that. y'all are crazy. And they looked at me and they said, okay, we're going to start pointing it out every time you say that. Oh my gosh, I said that so much. Like, it was like multiple times conversation that you just said it. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize I said that. But when I started to have the realization that was going on and some accountability to point it out to me, I started to weed that out of my language and said, no, I would say we were, the proper way to say it. And, kind of the same thing with the kids, like, when you see that mirror reflection, an improper response would be, you don't say that, and then I'm going to continue saying that.
Right, exactly.
A proper response would be some introspection, say, like, okay, I don't want her saying that. Like, that's not the best for her. So maybe I shouldn't say that as well, right?
Absolutely. Now, granted, just because something comes out of your kid's mouth doesn't mean that they necessarily picked it up from you.
Doesn't know.
So yesterday, here's a good story. We were, we had the whole family in the car. We were driving down to Weatherford. And I don't remember what it was that we were talking about, but we were playing some kind of a car game where you try to guess some kind of something that starts with a particular letter, and then you get some hints, and you try to guess. And Sam, she, I don't remember what in the world she said, but she made a guess, and everybody's laughing. And then Joni, our 3-year-old, pipes up in the back seat, and she goes, "You're not funny, Mom." And everybody just starts laughing. It's like, she didn't hear that from us, I don't think. Where's she getting that one?
Are you sure you didn't say that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Behind closed doors, it's like, your mom's not funny.
Oh, gosh.
Lottie does the opposite with me. I'll be annoying Randy and trying to mess with her, and Lottie will go, "You're funny, Dad." And I'm like, just encouragement. It just propels me on just to keep going. Yeah. I love it. But yeah, it's very much mirror reflection and self-analyzing of like, okay, how can I be more faithful so that way my daughter or my son can be more faithful as well. Now getting into this, it's not always like a sure thing. So you've got the passage, raise a child up in the Lord, and they shall not soon depart. That's not a promise.
Right.
It's a principle. Right. And promises mean like A plus B will equal C. This is more like A plus B will like put you in the vicinity of C, right? But it's not a sure thing. Right. And we see that in today's passage, right? So we got Manasseh, awful guy, did awful things in the sight of the Lord, led Israel astray, awful king, but was raised by the best king of Israel.
Yep. Hezekiah.
Yeah. So do you have anything on Hezekiah?
One of the things. So I kind of want to. I would kind of be curious. Now, Scripture doesn't tell us, so this sort of speculating. But I think we see the same thing played out even today. Just in practical life situations. So you raise. There's nothing in the text that would seem to suggest that Manasseh wasn't raised up in the fear and discipline of the Lord, right? Hezekiah, again, was a great king, the best king at this point.
Which that's not us saying that. That's the Bible saying that.
Yeah, Scripture says that.
Scripture says that Hezekiah was the best king.
Right.
I think even Judah, better than Solomon and David. It says that, right? I believe so. 2 Kings 18. Let me look up just to make sure.
Yeah, double check.
2 Kings 18:5. Hezekiah relied on the Lord God of Israel. Not one of the kings of Judah was like him, either before him or after him. He remained faithful to the Lord and did not turn from following him, but kept the commandments of the Lord had commanded Moses. So essentially saying, there's no one like him before that or after that. Hezekiah, man, great guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of curious if Hezekiah would have lived long enough to have seen his son turn out the way that he did, at least for the first part of his reign when he's doing all these awful things, including sacrificing his own sons to these false gods. What would Hezekiah's reaction have been, and what would a proper reaction then be?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point before we get too deep into those questions of Manasseh took over at age 12.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but
There was some overlap in the rule.
yeah, there's some overlap. And so, what was it? How many years was there overlap? I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
But yeah, there's a little bit of overlap. But presumably, Hezekiah died, right? And then Manasseh was, left on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are you saying the question is, what if Hezekiah would have stayed alive longer?
Yeah, let's say even he wasn't king, right? He retires, and his son goes off and is doing all of these things. How is it that Hezekiah, or even maybe we can sort of bring it to today? So here's the hypothetical, right? That does play itself out. We spend a lot of time staying faithful, raising our children in the Lord. And then they grow up, they become teenagers, young adults, and then they depart from the faith. What's the proper response? How should we go about?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's tricky, man, because on one hand, so presumably they're out of the house, they're past 18, they're adults, they're living their own life. So there's this weird balance of like you are still their parent and you still want to guide them. On the other hand, they're an adult. And they can make all of the decisions on their own. And if you lean too heavy into your parenting, now it just pushes them away.
It alienates them.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, well, if you're just going to tell me what to do, I'm an adult. If you're just going to keep telling me what to do, I just won't come around anymore. And so there's that balance of how can you faithfully kind of help lead them, and at the same time not push so hard that it pushes them away and does the opposite of what you want it to do. And man, I don't have a good answer, mainly because my child is 3,
right?
And I'm gonna delay that for 15 more years. But I think probably a good start is like where I'm at right now. Yeah, so I'm at age 3, which means I need to spend the next 15 years of Lottie's life creating a culture and an environment where she trusts me and where she is open to coming to me with her problems and that she's willing to hear what I have to say. I heard like a good rule of thumb or a good like parenting technique is by age 18 there are no rules in your household. So she's age 3 right now. Basically nothing but rules. She has very little autonomy in the household. But with every year that she grows up, she gets a little bit more responsibilities and a little bit less rules. And, the idea being, let's say she turns 12 and it's like, okay, at the age 12, it's going to be like, okay, we're going to allow you to do this now on your own. But if you show us that you are not responsible with this, we're going to pull the reins back and reestablish the rule. And so, like, with every year, you're just a little bit more freedom. And the idea is by 18, complete freedom, but it's not a stark nothing to everything overnight. It's a slow burn. So, they learn how to gain autonomy and make proper decisions while you're under their household. So essentially, the idea being, ideally, speaking as someone who has a 3-year-old, not an 18-year-old, but ideally is you kind of create a culture where they've learned responsibilities and they've learned that they can come to you when those responsibilities start to get murky in the waters. So I think that would be kind of the first preliminary start is to do that. But let's assume that they're 18 already, or they're 20 or whatever, and they're out of your house. I would say. Yeah, again, just showing that fine line of like, hey, I'm here for you. I want the best for you. I'm not going to tell you what to do because 1, I can't. And 2, like you're an adult now. You need to be able to make your own decisions. Not a great answer. But, you got thoughts?
Lee brings it up sometimes when during a sermon. One thing that we can do is just be in prayer and not give up. He's even talked about that recently on a Sunday morning. Other things we can do is still be faithful. So I think a lot of times when our kids or not, so when there are grown children that are leaving the house, making their own decisions that are poor decisions, that are departing from the faith, I think there's a lot of times a temptation where you don't want to lose that relationship. You don't want to lose having a good relationship with them, because at that point, you really want to shift ultimately into being friends with them. I mean, at the same time, you're always a parent, but at the same time, there's more of a friendship role that we'll get to enjoy. And so we don't want there to be so much focus on being friends and affirming their sinful departure from the faith and the things that they go out and do. And so I think for us, even remaining faithful, going back to the first point, right? Being faithful, remaining faithful, despite that, is important. So to not compromise on our own faith in order to pursue and try to make that relationship better, somehow to be able to bring them back, I think staying firm in our faith is important as well.
Yeah, and then hopefully, it can, almost, if we're talking about someone who has departed from the faith, hopefully you can have a prodigal son moment.
Right.
Kind of thing where, if we take a look at that situation. So the son wants to leave the father, and the father's like, okay, here you go. The father didn't dig his heels in.
Right.
The father didn't say, no, you're staying here and you're going to like it. He said, okay, if you want to do that, you can do that. Okay, go on out. And, and I'm sure he made it abundantly clear, when you're ready, I'm here. I'm here ready to go.
Yep.
And somewhere along the way, in the prodigal son's adventures, there was probably something in the back of his mind of maybe I can return home, because I'm sure there's a lot of guilt that kind of comes along that as well. I've shamed my father, I've shamed our family name, and no matter what he has said to me, there's probably that thought of man, I've done too much. I can't go back.
Yeah, and if you remember in the parable, he didn't come back and ask to be fully reinstated as his son.
Yeah.
He came back and he said, hey, I would be content just being a servant here, because I would live a better life than I was out there with the pigs. And so there was no expectation there either, but the father in the parable was gracious to his son and merciful to his son, and reinstated him as his son, even though there was nothing that he did to merit that or earn that. And so we're getting off. I'm getting off a little bit.
Yeah. So it's very much, staying faithful. And then, when they do reach that point, because, if you're 18 or 20 years old, you think you have the world figured out, right?
Yes.
It's I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. I've got all the wisdom in the world to know what to do. And it's not until you get, a few years into that you realize, this adult life is a bit more complicated than I thought it was. I don't quite have everything figured out. And if you just take the faithful approach, it's like that. I'm not going to celebrate your sin, but I'm also not going to drag you kicking and screaming.
Right.
I'm just going to stay faithful over here. I'm going to pray for you, and I'm going to be here for you. Then hopefully there's not such a hardness and bitterness built up that when they do hit rock bottom, that they're ready to come back. But if you press in too hard, there's going to a pride issue starts to come out into place, and so it's
that many more obstacles in the way.
Yeah, so you may have at 18 they start making these decisions, and you may be fighting with them for the next 5 years, and so now they're 23 and they're ready at 23 to come back, but there's been so much turmoil and arguing and bickering and bitterness built up that even though they're ready to come back, they won't.
Right.
They just won't, because now they have to get past their pride, and their pride is, and that's sort of where the Jews were. With God, they just got so hardened to the Word of God that they couldn't get past that hardness. Anyways, so I think that's a good place to be, and then just pray, because at the end of the day, again, they're adults. They make their own decisions. As Dave Ramsey says, stupidity isn't illegal. And so you let people be stupid.
Sometimes it's that way.
Yeah, right. Did you have any other thoughts on that one?
No, just again, reiterating the point, stay faithful.
Yeah.
It starts in the home with men. It starts with husbands. It starts with fathers. Primarily.
Yeah, and it doesn't have so like it's like in the case with Hezekiah, who's the dad of Manasseh, and Hezekiah was a great king, and so we're going to presumably assume that he was also a great dad. Doesn't give us any indication that he wasn't. So you had the greatest king, presumably a great dad, and you still had Manasseh go off on his own way. And so, like, if you have a situation where, like, you have a child who is kind of departed from the faith, that doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, look at David and Solomon.
Yeah.
Even. I mean, David was a man after God's own heart. And Solomon, while he did a lot of great things, he also did a lot of boneheaded things. And
That's how he got the wisdom, right?
Yeah, and it's because of Solomon that the kingdom of Israel split into two. I think Lee brought that up Sunday morning as well.
Yeah, and so it's very much like if you're in a situation, like don't overly beat yourself up.
Right.
Like, it's easy to, like, try to look back and be like, where did we go wrong? Where did we go wrong? You may have not did anything wrong. Like, that's the beauty of autonomy, is like you have the ability to, like, depart from the faith or go towards the faith. And so just because your child has departed from the faith doesn't necessarily mean that you are the cause of that, with the caveat of you may do some introspection.
Yeah.
At the same time, you may ask, like, did we lean too heavy on the rules of religion and not enough on the faith and the grace of religion? Did our kids see our religion more as a Sunday morning thing, or did they see it as a daily following Christ thing? I think all these are good things to ask, and just ask, like, where did we go wrong? And then the answer may be, we didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And another good reminder is it's not our job to change anybody's heart. It's not our job to change our kids' hearts. For us, being faithful means raising our kids in the fear and instruction of the Lord. But God's the one who saves. Parents aren't the ones who save. And so, if we are faithful and diligent to raise our kids in the right way, we need to be able to really leave the results up to God.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yep.
And so that even takes a little, some pressure off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got stay faithful. I think we've belabored that enough. But stay faithful, that we have an amazing power to lead our family and our children either to God or away from God. And we see that with Manasseh, led Israel away from God. And then the second one is stay home. Stay home. Thoughts?
Stay home. And Pastor Lee, he said, that doesn't mean that you, can't go to the store.
Right.
It's like, okay.
So he's not saying be a stay-home dad.
Right. Not necessarily.
Not that that's a bad thing.
Right. But he's not saying, okay, everybody, in order to pull this off, we're all just going to stay home. We're going to stay in a little, make our home a little convent or a little monastery.
We'll all either telework, remote work from home,
Teledoc,
or we'll all start Amazon drop shipping companies.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'll be little recluses or something.
Yeah, that's not what he means.
No. He said, don't quit on your family. Don't quit on your responsibilities. And so I don't know about you.
That reminds me. That fourth one, don't get divorced. That's what it was
okay.
on those four things to be, that was the one that was slipping my mind. The most important one that we're talking about: don't get divorced, keep the family intact, stay home. Okay,
yes,
there we go.
Yes, okay. Stay home. Staying home and really fulfilling those responsibilities, which once again is tied right back to being faithful, is important. I think. I don't know about you, but it sure can. It can be easy. I know, especially in the past, it's, there's things that I like to go and do that my wife doesn't like to go and do. And there's even been times, early marriage, where, I would enjoy going out and going hunting a lot. And I was gone a lot. And this is, I was gone so much that it started to negatively impact, our relationship. And so, I think for sure, there needs to be a balance whenever we look at our lives, especially as men, husbands, and fathers. We have work, we have our hobbies, we have our families, we have all the things that we like to do, that we have responsibility to do. Are we balancing those things well?
Yeah, and this is a unique struggle for our culture, where it wasn't as much so in the previous culture. Because in previous cultures, your kids did what you did. Like if you were a blacksmith, your kids grew up and they were blacksmith. If you were a farmer, they were a farmer. So whenever it came time, like let's say in the Jewish community, I think it was 13, they were done with their formative education, and then they would make a choice at 13. They would say, okay, I'm either going to continue on in my education to become like a rabbi, or I'm going to go do the family trade. It's at 13, that's where you do it. And so from 13 on, unless they were going to go do that further education, they would be with the dad almost all day, like the sons be with the father, the daughters be with the mother, and they would be learning the trade, right? Mm-hmm. And so in their most formative years, you were all day with them, teaching them how to do work and how to, live out life. Well, now it's not the case, right? It's like both you and I left our kids today and went to work. My wife, on the days that she works, will leave the kids and go to work. And so that's, presumably 8 hours a day that we're not with our kids, where in history past, we were with the kids. Mm-hmm. And it's just the way the culture is, it's the way that we're set up. I don't think, it's necessarily a bad thing, but it just means that we have to be all the more intentional, because now we have an 8-hour gap that's gone.
Right.
Where in history, we had that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, with that 8-hour gap gone, now the time that we do have, we just have to be all the more intentional to be there and be present.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then another thing to think about is, for those 8 hours that the kids aren't with us too, are we responsible in sort of overseeing what it is that they're consuming or taking in, or how it is that they're being influenced, whether it's by the world culture, those sorts of things, others. And so,
especially with public schools, right? You're like, I wasn't going to go there, but
I wasn't going to go there. But
so it's a reality that we're in, and we're not necessarily saying public schools are bad. My kids aren't old enough to be in school yet, and we haven't fully decided what we're going to do yet. But gone are the days that you could hand your kids off to those teachers and trust that they're going to get everything that they need and nothing more.
Right. And I think part of the reality is, here in Texas, right, it's far less, woke, or there's far less indoctrination here in school districts than other parts of the country. And I think that's pretty clear. And part of the issue is it really depends on the teacher and what extra things that they
especially in the younger
in. And so no, I don't think public schools are like, oh, that's the problem. If we could only pull them out, then problem solved.
Right.
That's not the case.
Yeah. So I went to a private Baptist school for college. Mm-hmm. I taught at a Christian school. All the things that are in public schools are in private schools.
Yeah.
They're just a little bit more tame.
Right.
And they're a little bit more segregated in the sense of like they're hidden off over here. Like, went to East Texas Baptist University, and you think, oh, we're going to a Baptist school. It's going to be a church service all day. No one's ever going to do anything wrong. And, there's parties and whatnot. And, sin is going to find its way.
Wait, at a Baptist college?
Baptist school, yeah, right.
You're like, what?
Yeah. And so, sin is going to find its way in these things. And so regardless of if it's public school, homeschool, private school, you still have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, that's right. And there are, I don't think we should, there's even a lot of public school teachers that are faithful believers and faithful Christians. And, the thing is, do you know who the teachers are?
Yeah.
I think is a big part of it. And then, what are they learning? So I think you said it just a minute ago that gone are the days where we can just sort of blindly trust and in any school really to feed our kids the things that they need to. And I think it goes back to that stay home. We should be responsible and not even try to rely on a school, whether it's public, whether it's private. Homeschool's a little different because parents are the ones doing the teaching.
I don't trust them.
Right. Or let's say even church. I mean, there's things that, a private school can do, a private Christian school can do. There's things that the church can do to help raise kids and be able to teach kids. But the ultimate responsibility for raising our kids in the Lord is us as parents. And so, there's, again, the responsibility falls on us.
Yeah. So even though, so the principle of stay at home, even in the situations that we're not literally at home with the kids, let's say they have to go to school or whatnot, the principle of it is you are still responsible for your kids. And so do your due diligence, meet the teachers, ask your kids what they're learning when they come home.
Yeah.
And, not that there's going to be some great, thing happen. But even if it's like they're just learning math, you still have a responsibility to know what your kid's learning and help them in that and walk them through that. If they're not coming with you to work to learn the trade, as in the past, at the very least what you can do is help them process what they learned. While you were
that's right.
out there.
And part of it is asking really good questions. So I go to pick my kids up from school in the afternoon during the school year, and if I ask them, "How did school go today?" The answer is, "It was good." Okay, great. What did you learn today? Nothing. What was your favorite part of the day? Lunch, recess, something like that.
I can't even be mad at them. So I'll come home and Randy will be like, "So how was work today?" I was like, "It was fine."
Maybe Randy needs to ask you better questions.
Randy, are you watching? All right, pay attention. Here we go.
Right. So instead of saying, what did you learn at school today? It's, what did you read today? Or, what books did the teacher read? Or what books did you check out from the library? Or, hey, I know that you're learning about, because teachers send out newsletters, usually at the elementary level at least, and so I know what they're going over, what they're going through.
So it's a trick question.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I know the answer. I want to hear them tell me about it because I want to know what they're getting. And it's like, how's addition going this week? Those sorts of things. And
how's addition going? Oh, it's great. I'm really good. What's 1 + 1? Just ask them.
Right.
Pop quiz them in the.
Watch the wheels start turning. Yeah. And then,
what does plus mean?
Right.
Anyways.
Or another thing is, checking their work. Teachers send work home.
Yeah.
So you can go and look and actually see what it is that they've been doing in class and learning. And and that way you can ask those probing questions. And, hey, look, I see you got this one wrong. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. So taking responsibility for even whenever you aren't there with your kids, taking responsibility for it and doing due diligence, following up, helping them process all those things. All that's part of being not just a good dad, but a good parent in that. And let's talk about this study that Lee brought up. There's a guy that was looking at church decline. And I think that's an interesting topic that we could spend a lot of time on. Oh, you got it pulled up? There we go. What was the name of it?
Yeah, it's on Fox News. It's the title of the article is, "Here's Why People Abandon Church and the Right Way to Fix It." Evangelists must foster healthy, Christ-centered marriages for a faith renewal to take root.
Yeah. So it's looking at the decline of the church and the denominations, and that's been pretty well established for a little bit.
Yes.
COVID kind of accelerated that a bit. But pretty much every denomination and Christianity as a whole in America is on the decline. And this article that Lee brought up is kind of digging into, okay, why is that the case? And how can we fix that? And this guy drew some correlations on the decline of the church with the decline in the stability of the household. correct?
Yep.
Yeah, and so as households started to become more unstable and single motherhood and single parents started to become a bigger thing and divorce started to become a bigger thing, that's when we started to see the decline in that. And I think it said 80% of churchgoers came from intact, stable homes, right? So only 20%, only 1 in 5 people in church came from a broken home. And so with all that, he's drawn the conclusion of the decline of the church is due to the decline of the stability of the home, meaning that the solution to increase church attendance and Christianity is going to be the increase in the stabilization of the home, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with the second point, stay home, we have this responsibility to our kids. At the same time, in order to benefit the kids and to help fulfill that responsibility to the kids, we also need to be responsible to our spouse as well, and really do everything that we can to invest in our marriages. So, if there wasn't enough to do already, just with raising the kids, we're responsible for maintaining and even building up our marriages. Again, the study found 80% of all Sunday church attendees in the United States grew up in a continuously married home with both biological parents at a time when this is becoming increasingly rare. So 80%.
Yeah.
That's a huge number. That's not like, oh, it's close, right? 80%.
Well, and for sure, so kids very rarely are the actual cause of divorces, right?
Right.
No, the stress of kids may be putting stress on the marriage and cause them, but usually it's because just the parents don't get along, or there's infidelity, or trust issues, or whatnot, whatever it may be. But you are no good. A marriage that's not healthy is going to be no good for kids, right? So if your primary focus is, I want to take care of my kids at the expense of my marriage, well, that's ultimately going to be to the detriment of your kids.
Absolutely.
Right. And so the better thing is, okay, let's first make sure our marriage is good. And then the overflow of that is going to be into our kids, right? And so it's like if you kind of look at a hierarchical kind of tiered system, it's okay, first I need to make sure that I'm just operating. I'm operating to my fullest ability, not in an indulgent sense, but in am I taking care of myself? Is my walk with the Lord where it should be? I just need to make sure that I am solid. Next, I need to make sure my relationship with my wife is solid and care for her. Okay, how can I get her to 100%? And then out of that, now it can flow down to our kids of, okay, how can we best do our kids? But a lot of times parents will sacrifice not only their relationship with their spouse, but themselves as well for their kids. And that might work in the short term, but long term, it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Which is why, eventually divorce will happen because the parents have become glorified roommates with each other. And so,
it's not hard to imagine how that happens, especially with younger children.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
By the time that you can get them in bed, if they'll stay in bed, right? It's already pretty late.
Yeah.
You're both exhausted and tired and just ready to crash for the night.
Yeah.
We've done that where we fight with the kids and finally get them to go to bed. Especially our daughters are both night owls. They take after me a little bit on that. Paul. No, his head hits the pillow. He's out like a light. Yeah. But the girls, they'll be up even late, and then we're just trying to sit on the couch and decompress a little bit, and then you hear the little pitter patter. Of feet coming. It's I thought we put y'all to bed 45 minutes ago. Why are y'all awake? Well, they just feed off each other. They're lucky they're cute. But even that, by the time. By the time that everybody's actually in bed and asleep, and you have a moment to yourselves, you and your spouse, then it's man, I don't feel like talking, or I don't feel like spending any time with you, and so
just want to numb out.
Right. And so being intentional about. I think we have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, and it's practical ways to do that is just a date night. Finding time to. Ask friends to, y'all have watched our kids before while we go out and eat steak. Or, if you need to scrounge up some pennies to like hire a babysitter or do whatever, just to like have some time to invest in each other, working cooperatively together to allow each other to have time to decompress. You know, there's some days that, you know, I watch the kids and it's a great day. There's some days I need a break. I need a break. Randy comes in, I need to go sit alone for 30 minutes.
And in the quiet, in the dark, overstimulated all day.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's just, you know, just finding ways to like care for each other and like giving them like, you know, there's times that like I need to go to the store and pick up something, and it's, I can leave both kids with Randy, or I can just take Lottie with me because she's kind of at that age. She likes going to the store, and that might, you know, help ease her load for those 30 minutes that I'm gone.
It's an adventure. Those trips are fun, especially when you have multiples and you can just take the one along. And even that brings up another point, is being intentional about your relationship with your individual kids.
Yes,
because that can be tough. My 3, 8, 6, and then 3. I mean, so much of the time when they're all together, it's like they have their own little society. And in a lot of ways, I'm on the outside looking in. And so whenever I get especially the older 2 kids one-on-one, it's I really enjoy the time you know that I get with them, and it helps their mom, like you said. If I need to go to the store anyway, and she's had a long day, then maybe I'll take one of the 2 older ones and the little one, or you know, whatever the combo is, and. It's fun. It's a great way even to invest in our kids and our relationships with them.
Well, because a lot of times, especially with younger kids, I can't speak for older kids because we're not there yet. But a lot of times, like, man, you're just kind of in survival mode. Like, you're not thinking about how do I thrive in this situation. You're thinking about how do I just survive in this situation. How do I get through it without killing one of the kids and getting into a fight with my spouse. And so it's kind of like. And in some cases, like you have to live in that mode. Like if you got a brand new baby,
you're in survival mode.
You're in survival mode. Like you're just trying to get through the day. But you have to come to a point where you have to intentionally sit down and say, how do we shift from survival to a sustainable long-term solution to where both of us are getting what we need individually. We're getting what we need as a marriage, and we're also getting what we need as a family.
Yeah.
And intentionality.
Right.
That's the way to do it.
Well, and those 3 things really need to take place at once. The taking care of yourself, your marriage, and your family. So it's if you've been introspective, you realize I'm not investing as much as I should in myself or in my marriage. That's not a blank check to just write off the kids and, hey, I'm going to go on a 6-month self-discovery journey. I'm going to go backpacking through Europe, and I'm going to really, you know, discover myself. And, you know, pour into myself that way. That's and I don't think that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
but just to be clear,
it's not a free ticket to be selfish.
Right. Exactly.
Because it can very easily shift into I need to take care of myself. And I'm taking care of myself at the expense of my spouse, at the expense of my kids. And yeah, sure. Like I could be filled up if I just have 3 hours to go do what I want every single day. But now it's 3 hours that load gets dumped on my wife. Right. And so, yeah, it's where it comes into the intentionality and the cooperation of, you know, like once a week I go and meet with a friend for coffee. And so me and my wife have decided, okay, that extra, you know, hour to hour and a half that she's going to have to take with my kids, that's an hour and a half for me to be able to kind of like be poured into a little bit outside of our family. And the goal is, and usually what happens is I come home and that hour and a half helps me be a better father and a better spouse for the rest of that week. And so it's coming to an agreement on what's appropriate. And what's actually beneficial, because it can very quickly turn into I just need 3 hours to go numb out, and that may not be beneficial. Right. You know, maybe what feels good in the moment, but that may not be what's beneficial to my wife and my kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep. And so very much, investing in the marriage just as much as you're investing in the kids. Any other thoughts about the stay at home? There's other things that Lee talked about, but I don't know if we have time to get fully into it.
But I think you brought it up earlier with the passage in Proverbs about, raise your kids in the Lord. When they grow, they won't depart from it. I'm paraphrasing. But, again, even if we are faithful, remain faithful, if we're faithfully raising our kids the right way, if we're home, if we're staying home, if we are pouring into them, if we're present, if we're doing everything we can to guard our marriages, our relationships with our kids, it doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't guarantee that if they do depart from the faith, there will eventually be repentance. Just to sort of recap what you're saying, because I do think this is important. If you look at John Piper, he's a bigger name evangelical pastor he's retired now. One of his sons, Abraham Piper, is one that
Abraham.
Yeah, you've heard of him, right?
No, I've heard of Barnabas Piper.
Oh,
I think it's his other son.
Yeah, this one, he even from the time he was a teenager, he fell away from the faith and has even gone from simply not believing to being more aggressive towards Christianity and things like that. And I can only imagine how that must make John feel. I don't even want to go there. Again, can't imagine. But again, there's time's hasn't run out on that situation, and so you never know what may happen. But again, a man that's faithful to the gospel, that's even a pastor, has lived his life and dedicated his life to serving the church that way, isn't immune from that. And so, again, sometimes yes, they do come back. Other times they may not, or may not have yet. So just remaining faithful, doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, being responsible is important for us.
Yeah, and now we'll tie that in with how Lee kind of conclude the sermon. So Manasseh spent his whole life, or his whole professional life as king, running away from God, doing things that was detestable in the sight of God, and leading Israel away from God. However, the story doesn't end there.
Right.
He actually has a moment of repentance where he comes back to God. Now, how does that happen?
Well, let's read it.
Yeah.
2 Chronicles 33. I'm going to start back in verse 10, and we'll read through 13. The Lord spoke to Manasseh and to his people, but they paid no attention. Therefore, the Lord brought upon them the commanders of the army of the king of Assyria, who captured Manasseh with hooks and bound him with chains of bronze and brought him to Babylon. And when he was in distress, he entreated the favor of the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. He prayed to him, and God was moved by his entreaty and heard his plea and brought him again to Jerusalem into his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord was God. Which, my gosh, what an incredible ending. Or ending for the sermon anyway. But, what a story. So here's Manasseh doing things as detestable as sacrificing his own sons to these false gods. And it takes this, what's the word, catastrophe in his life to really wake him up, to shock him into waking up to repenting. I mean, the Lord in this way really got his attention. Yeah,
because it's really important to look at God is the one that brought the military to come bound him up, right?
That's right.
Which is an important lesson for all of us. A lot of times, like when things happen in our life, we're like, oh, like this isn't God. This is like Satan trying to work against me and stuff like that. And no, it may be God trying to wake you up.
Yeah.
It may be God trying to get your attention here. A lot of times, like the situations that we find ourselves in our life are the direct result of us falling away from God.
Yep.
And we're just we've made our bed, now we're living in it kind of thing. And so that's important to know, is that God sent this army, not to necessarily punish Manasseh as much as this to discipline him and to bring Manasseh back, right? And
yeah, that's right. And there's a pretty stark contrast here between Assyria and Manasseh and Assyria and Hezekiah. So if you'll remember, I think it was just the chapter before this in 2 Chronicles 32, if I remember right. The Assyrian army they invade the kingdom of Judah. They're there at the walls of Jerusalem, and Hezekiah cries out and asks God to help, to help save them. He humbles himself, and ultimately, God delivers. Right, He sends angel to come and destroy the Assyrian army, and suddenly the threat is totally gone. Right, Hezekiah is faithful. Right, Manasseh, he had to learn the lesson the hard way, didn't he? So here we go. The army of the king of Assyria captures him. It's probably not a very pretty sight as he's brought to Babylon, and the result of that was he humbled himself. So sometimes, and here's an encouraging note, sometimes it takes some of us a little longer to sort of wake up, humble ourselves.
We need to hit rock bottom a little harder.
Basically,
yeah.
Somebody's rock bottom might be here. Somebody else's rock bottom may be down here.
Yeah. Now here's the important thing to note. So it says that he sought the favor of the Lord and humbled himself before God. And it says he prayed to him and the Lord was receptive to his prayer. So even though Manasseh devoted himself against God to his own practices, to his own desires, to other gods, other idols, and led Israel in the same direction, you would think that God is like, no, you're done. You're out of here. But no, like when Manasseh came to God humbly, God accepted him, right? And that's just a good encouragement to all of us, whether we're in a situation where we ourselves have drifted from God, or we have a child that's drifted from God, that there's always hope and that God will always receive them back if they come to God humble and seeking him out, right? Important thing to note, we didn't read it, but it tells us that this, coming to Jesus moment that Manasseh had wasn't just a get out of hell free card, or get out of jail free card in this case. But it says that he actually went back and he removed all the idols from the temple and essentially rededicated the temple to God, and not only him, but all the people of Israel were sacrifices to the Lord alone. Yeah. And so this is like a true conversion, repentance. He's come back to God and has led Israel back to God, which again leads us back to point one of the fathers. We have an amazing ability to lead and responsibility to lead, and then the same way that are leading our family away from God, we have the same ability to lead them to God, in the same way that Manasseh led Israel away from God, but he also led Israel back to God. Yeah,
absolutely. And for some, we may identify more with Hezekiah. For others, we may identify more with Manasseh, even. Right. And so, it's that leadership role again that we are supposed to play in our homes and in our families. Even we can even broaden this out to an extent to involve work or whatever that it is, whatever sphere. But it's a great responsibility, but it's also a great privilege to be able to lead others in our families, our kids, and everybody else to the Lord.
Yep. So that's Sunday sermon. The faith of a father, the 2 points that we talked about today is to stay faithful and to stay home. And the idea being is stay faithful, lead your family well, let them see your faith to the Lord, and they will follow that. And then 2, stay home in the sense of be involved in your family's life, not just your kid's life, but your spouse's life as well. Do your due diligence, take responsibility for that, and help lead them through those things and be involved in their life. All right, well, that is Sunday's sermon. I liked it as a father. I always enjoy hearing parenting sermons. But that's it for that one. So now we get to move into
Bad Doctrine of the Week.
Bad Doctrine of the Week.
We still need a song.
Is that the song?
Yeah, it's coming out.
It's coming out. Yeah, Judah's working on it. All right. I have not heard the bad doctrine of the week this time. Jacob's got it, so we're gonna figure this one out together.
If I can get it to open.
If you can get it to open. Judah, how you doing? We can just chat while Jacob's getting that ready.
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, I woke up at like 4 last night and just was awake.
Ouch.
And so I just kind of laid there. I had like really bad heartburn. I had Wingstop last night. Probably shouldn't have had that.
Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes, isn't it?
I'm getting old enough now that like I'm feeling the effects of my food. Are you there yet? Do you feel the effects of your food yet?
No, it just goes right through me.
All right, so I finally got the article.
Okay, bad doctrine of the week.
That's right.
There we go.
Song forthcoming. Okay, so there's an article from Forbes magazine. Came out June 13th of this year. Here's the headline, and I'll kind of read some snippets to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. And this actually flows nicely into what, the sermon, even. Okay, here's the headline. 2 reasons why living apart together marriages are on the rise, according to a psychologist. Living apart together marriages. So, recently, I'll just kind of read some snippets. The BBC featured a story about a Japanese couple who made the unconventional decision to maintain a legal marriage while living separately. The reason more and more couples choose separation marriage is because they want to maintain their lifestyle, says Hiromi Takeda, who adopted a separation marriage with her husband, this other guy with the same last name, to combine the benefits of both being married and being single.
Like tax-wise?
Although we don't live together, our marriage provides me with emotional support. It's so wonderful to dream of a future, not alone, but with my wife.
Okay, so...
So, Chris, tell me, what are your thoughts about...
let me just make sure I'm wrapping my mind around what's going on. All right, so they're married legally, but they live in separate houses? Like, they're not even in the same house, just different rooms?
Presumably.
Yeah, so they're living completely separate lifestyles, but they're still married. Doesn't sound like a marriage.
Well, how would you define, or like, what is a marriage then? Like, what does the Bible say about?
Okay, so the Bible says marriage is between one man, one woman. Whenever God instituted marriage in Genesis, He says, "Therefore, a husband shall leave his father and mother, cling fast to his wife, and the two shall become one." Right? This doesn't sound like one.
This sounds like, what is it? Like, 1 + 1 equals like 1.5 or 2 or it's like they're doing some funny math right here.
Yeah. So the reasoning is they just want to maintain their own lifestyle.
Yes. So you get some of the benefits of marriage. You get some of the benefits of being single. So here's another sort of part of this article. Living apart together may be the right solution if you and your partner are unable to meet each other in the middle on issues like, do either of you have dietary restrictions or habits that cause the other partner considerable inconvenience? I have thoughts on these, by the way. Here's another one. You'll like this one. Do you have conflicting ideas about personal space? And then here's this one. Are there any health, financial considerations, or other responsibilities that might be better managed individually rather than jointly?
All right. Okay. Judah, you're single, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Here's some advice. If this is your thought, let's say you meet a gal and you're like, man, I love this girl. She's great. She's fantastic. But she's gluten-free. And I just don't know if I can live that lifestyle. Well, not even live that lifestyle. I just don't even know if I can live in the same house as her.
I can't be around you.
I just can't be around you because you're going to have a different dietary style than me. Don't get married. Just don't get married, man. Like, okay, all right.
Well, I'll say this about that one because that was the one that really caught my attention. So, my wife is lactose intolerant.
Yeah.
And so, if she's cooking, I like cheese personally. So, lasagna, for example, is off the menu, and this is something that has to be okay.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to expect her to go and make a lasagna special for me. I mean, that'd be cool, but right. I mean, it's not a reasonable expectation. And, but that doesn't mean that, hey, you know what? You get your own kitchen, I get my own kitchen and our own separate living areas, and we'll get together for date night or we'll get together for a sleepover or whatever.
Man, yeah. So it's interesting. So again, we talked about marriage before. One of the whole points of marriage is that you become one, right? And in becoming one, it sounds all like you're at the wedding. It's like, oh yeah, everything that I have is yours.
Like the unity candle.
Yeah, and everything they have is mine. And it's so beautiful and such a poetic, romantic thought. But in reality, it's a nightmare, man.
Personally, I wouldn't say it's a nightmare in case my wife is watching. You dig your own grave on that one.
Just kidding. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced in my life. No, okay.
You're going to have to buy her flowers to make up for that one.
So she would agree it's just as much a nightmare for her because, okay, you've got two completely individual people with their own quirks and their own ways of living, their own cleanliness standards, their own dietary standards, their own financial standards. And the idea of marriage is I've got my own way of living and my own thought process on how the world works, and you've got your own. And the idea isn't that we both continue operating just on our own, but we both come together and we create something new and something different in that. And what that ends up doing is it does, to be fair to the article, it does create a lot of stress in the beginning because you're trying to figure out how it works, right? Your wife is lactose intolerant. My wife doesn't have any dietary restrictions in that sense, but she does like gluten. Does it
affects her?
Yeah, not what do they call gluten intolerant people? There's a word for it.
Google.
So she's not that far to where it's a medical condition, but it just has adverse effects on her body, and so a lot of times she'll be gluten free, and so it's just. Did you find it?
Celiac disease?
Yeah, that's it. Celiac
right.
disease. Yeah, so she doesn't have celiac disease, but she does have some adverse effects from gluten and dairy and stuff like that. And so it just kind of creates a little bit of tension at the beginning because you're trying to figure out, okay, you aren't going to make the same meals that I'm going to make.
Right.
And, if it moves over into finances, you're not going to make the same financial decisions that I'm going to make. Like I'm a cheapskate. And Randy is let's have a good time. When it comes to all these things, the solution isn't, okay, you go do you, and I'm going to go do me.
Right.
The unpopular opinion, I think spouses should have combined bank accounts. And the reason is because if we have the operation, let's throw a caveat on that. Caveat is, if one of your spouse has an abuse issue,
right,
or an issue where they are a legitimate liability to drain the bank account and put y'all in financial despair. If that's the case, y'all have some other issues to talk about. But in a normal situation, I think spouses should have combined bank accounts because the goal isn't, okay, here's your money, here's my money. You go spend it how you want, I'll spend it how I want, and we'll just come together on these common household things. No, combine them together, and then now we're going to have the fight. We're going to have the fight of what we do with this money now, right? And that's going to cause fights. It's going to cause disagreements because y'all are two different people, and they're going to have their own idea of how we should spend this money, and you're going to have your own idea of how you should spend this money. And the solution isn't, okay, we'll just go live two separate lives. No, the solution is, okay, let's sit and talk.
Yeah.
And let's figure this out because we are a man and a woman who have now become one. Not two separate things, one. And you can apply that to anything. And if you're in a situation that you are unwilling to budge on your lifestyle for your spouse, don't get married.
Yep.
Just don't do it because you're creating a world where you're going to be miserable. Yeah. And you're just going to get to the point where you're like, let's just live two separate lives and we'll just go out on date night. And it's like, it's not marriage.
Right.
It's not marriage.
And it kind of makes me wonder. So we've talked about this before, the increasing age of marriage. Yeah, it's been going up recently. What's the average age now? Do you
I think
remember?
for guys, it's 30.
Okay, 30. And so I wonder if, that's what this article really is talking about is like kind of a side effect of that.
Absolutely.
And so if you're already pretty well established in how you like to, or how you're living, right? And, you fall in love with somebody, but you don't really want to make those concessions because you're already so established. Is that where you see this kind of maybe coming from?
And absolutely, 100%. So I got married when I was 27, and so I lived on my own since I was 18, so 9 years. I lived on my own. I mean, you want to talk about culture shock?
Yeah.
Guys and girls live way differently.
Have you seen that? I think I might have showed you that it was there's a picture, and it's this apartment living room, and it's completely empty. All that there is in this room is a lazy boy recliner. There is a TV that's like on top of a box with like an Xbox or something. And the caption on the meme is, "It irritates women that men can live like this and be happy."
Yes. Live way differently. And so I lived 9 years on my own. And it's just kind of a culture shock because I was so used to the way that I lived that there was a lot of like growth that I had to do and compromise that I had to do, not because what she was doing was wrong, but because it was just different than how I did it. And so we had to again come to meet in the middle to make something new. Like she doesn't get everything that she wants and I don't get everything that I want. Like that's not the point. The point is how can we come together and be one now, not two individuals.
Right.
Very much delayed marriage is contributing to this, where you and Sam all got married pretty young, right?
I had just turned 22 and she was still 21 when we got married. So,
which in the olden days was old.
That used to be old,
yeah. But now it's like super young.
Yeah. So for us, in a lot of ways, we sort of grew up together. We started dating back in high school. We were 17, I guess, at the time, and got married a few years later. And so, we were even we weren't even totally out of college yet when we got married. And so for us, we really kind of got to start building that life together without those sort of, individually established lives before that for very long, if that makes sense. So, I mean, we struggled in some other ways. Like we had to go and each of us had to go and figure things out along the way, right? That was kind of one of the things about it. Getting married younger is, there's going to be mistakes that we make, but we didn't have that established life apart from each other, or not as established anyway, as living single and solo for 9 years first, and then having to sort of leave that in the rearview mirror to make something new.
Yeah.
And so it was different, I guess. It was just different.
Yeah. So, I would not recommend the living apart together marriages. At that point, I don't see that as a marriage anymore. It's just like it's a marriage in name, but in like principle and in like what marriage is supposed to be, you're just two single people.
Yeah.
Go on dates.
And what do you do whenever the kids arrive on the scene? What do you do?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, we're married, but functionally not. I mean, it did say in the article that, well, maybe someday, they're married, but they're living apart together. Maybe someday we will live together, but not yet. It's like, well, I want to enjoy being single-ish for now. And so, to be fair to the article, it seemed like that was like a future thing that they wanted to do, or perhaps this might lead to living together in the future. But sort of, it does bring up a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah. So we could belabor this for a long time. But,
yeah, we could.
But essentially, yeah, if that's the mindset you're going to take into marriage, just don't get married.
Yep. Be better to put it off.
Yeah, you got some stuff to figure out, because once you get into marriage again, you're sacrificing yourself. It's not about what you want anymore. It's not about necessarily what they want anymore. It's about what's the best for our combined marriage.
Right.
And sometimes that means that I eat gluten free.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means that Randy goes to Panda Express for Father's Day. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means that we buy the cage-free, free-range chicken eggs.
Does that irritate you a little?
Yeah. I'm such a cheapskate, man. I see like the $1.99 eggs, mm-hmm. and she reaches for the college-educated eggs that are like
that also have
like
their student loan debts.
Yeah, right.
Got to pay that off first.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had many discussions on this, Randy. I love you. I wouldn't want it any other way. They're great eggs.
That's true. He even told me that before we started the podcast.
Yes.
For the record.
Yes,
So.
I love my wife. I wouldn't want it any other way. But that's where we have rubs, is on what we value, and so it's again coming together to say not what does she want, and not what do I want, but what's best for our family. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means we do what she wants to do, and sometimes it means we do what I want to do.
Yep.
And sometimes it means that we create a whole new solution.
Yep.
That isn't what I want to do and what isn't what she wanted to do.
Yep. What is it? A good compromise leaves everybody upset, or there's some sort of a...
Well, it's like, have y'all seen Rules of Engagement? So it's a show about a couple that just got engaged, and they're talking to an older couple that's been married for a long time. And he's like, hey, how do y'all deal with this? And he said, well, let me tell you this. So when me and my wife got married, when me and my wife got married, she wanted a cat, and I didn't want a cat. And so we compromised and got a cat. Anyways, yeah. That's a good one. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, I don't like it, but it's
not bad for Bad Doctrine of the Week.
It's at least entertaining. All right. Well, we are glad that y'all tuned in for episode 3 of Digging Deeper. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow our channels. Give us a comment on what you think about all this stuff, and we'd love to interact with that. If you got any bad doctrines of the week, let us know. We love to talk about them. Yeah, we'll see you later. Judah, you want to say bye?
Bye.
All right. See y'all next week.